can I have just a specific question for you? So you work for the DIT, which is probably the only government department that actually liked home and abroad, because it does something quite useful both for UK business to actually reach out internationally and for international business to reach back to the UK. And I think you do a fantastic job in terms of bringing various delegations of different colour into the UK, and that's a fantastic job. What would your advice be to a green tech startup from Sweden or elsewhere coming to the UK? What are kind of the 2 or 3 key important things that you should do first before you kind of like, I'm going to the UK, I'm doing green tech, I'm the next big thing? What's your advice for those kind of businesses?
So I think the first thing is to think about who are your customers and where will they be, because I think most early stage businesses want to be close to their customers. So if your customers are in manufacturing, for instance, and they may be based in the Midlands, or if they're in the energy sector, they may be based in the northeast or in Scotland, think about a location which will be closer to these customers so you can easily access them. Secondly, think about the cash flow and have you got the money in the right place to drive this initiative. And bear in mind that the UK is a fantastic place to raise capital. Last year it was $39.8 billion equivalent VC funding for early stage companies in the UK, more than anywhere else in Europe. And then think about, as you grow your company, where do you want to be? We just heard of one option from Cambridge. So for instance, in Scotland, there's a fantastic location which is called Codebase, which helps tech companies get off the ground. It's not the only one, but it's a really good example. And think if you want to be in an acceleration program, there have been some great acceleration programs that run in the Northeast through Ignite, but run in other places. So it's all these kind of things are like, where do I want to be and what kind of location do I need to be? Have I got enough money to support all of that? And then finally, think about the talent, because you might want to bring people from Sweden, but you may also want to add to your team quite quickly. And again, there are many routes to help with that. And the last point, if you come to the UK, DIT will treat you like a UK company. And therefore, if you're interested in as you mentioned, Stefan, I think in the beginning, looking about the rest of the European region or further afield, then the UK can be a great base for you.
Very good. I've got a specific question for you, and you represent the construction sector, in the large infrastructure sector, larger scale. I think it's fair to say the UK is not necessarily known for being, the innovation leaders in regards to modern construction practices. You look at housing estates, often still being built to the blueprint of 30, 40 years ago. I used to work heavily in the tech sector. You're still getting new data centers today, which are built on the blueprints that are 40 years old. Equipment that's 40 years old is new, but the blueprint is old, but it's not very efficient. So what do you see, your role within that kind of construction sector? You see, obviously you're much more of a modern business, but also where do you see that sector going? And since we have so much to catch up on, what's the kind of the opportunity? Where do you see kind of like the real nuggets of commercial growth?
So I think your summary is actually pretty spot on. I'll use the term, the construction industry is a bit like a dinosaur kind of coming out of this revolution of what's going to happen with kind of digital tech and where we're going with sustainability. So I think you're spot on there. But comes with it, I think, is the greatest opportunity because it's actually one of the only, it's a huge industry that really hasn't been disrupted by tech yet. It's still doing things the way that it always was. Yes, it's started to become more efficient in the process all the way through, but I think it's a really exciting space to disrupt it. So whether that's through some new form of technology that could either be used on kind of driving carbon down throughout the whole process, or whether it's actually changing the way that the industry works from start to finish. But it is a resource-heavy industry, so in terms of the amount of carbon that it emits, it is a resource-heavy industry, and that's why Skanska signed up to its 2045 commitment. We are classing the whole supply chain in that. So what I mean by that is from the people that are actually on the ground doing the physical construction and the labour, the materials, all the way through to kind of up to our board level. That's what we're measuring, that carbon. Some of the construction companies in the UK will just be doing the board level, all their own direct reports. So I think there's this whole journey the industry is going to go on, but it will be rapid, actually. And I think we either disrupt ourselves, so the big players will either start disrupting themselves, or you guys will start disrupting if you're in our space. So.
Very good. Ben, I've got a question for you next. I'll give you a bit of a preamble. So the UK leads 2 tech races globally. One's fintech, the other one is Formula 1. Everybody knows about fintech. Formula One is kind of like not necessarily well known, but apart from two teams, they're all centered around Silverstone and Milton Keynes. Yeah, that's where the heart of advanced motor engineering is, and it has been for the last 30 years. Really, really impressive. Not really promoted, and never really got why. But the questions around mobility then, which obviously is one of your sort of, I know you do many things, but one of your kind of like core areas of expertise. Where do you see the opportunity in regards to, you know, the future of mobility, advanced engineering, automotive, you know, this, again, it's a very, very, should we say, dirty industry in terms of emissions. Where do you see the opportunity in that area, not just Milton Keynes and Foulser, but across the UK? What particular areas do you think is, you know, that's where you're going to see the next big thing?
It won't be a surprise to hear that we think the majority of road transport is going to be ultimately battery electric from everything through to medium commercial vehicles and part of the heavy goods vehicles piece. But I'd like to come back to what you were saying earlier about our colleague Cambridge around circular economy. So I think there's been a lot of focus on battery manufacturing. We've seen British Volt obviously being a big splash in the UK and securing, being a great news story with late 2021 from the investment perspective. But at some point, we're going to have this realization that batteries that are coming out of vehicles in 3, 4, 5 years' time need to be reconditioned or recycled. And there's going to be a lot of them, and there's going to continue to be a lot of them, and those will grow and grow and grow.
You've probably heard of Redwood Materials.
Yes.
One of our investors is the founder of Redwood JV.
Ah, okay, brilliant, fantastic. Oh, we should catch up on it later. So I actually see that there's stuff in the value chain which we've not really even thought about yet properly, and that recycling piece and reclamation piece is going to be really important. So that's one key area. Hydrogen is going to play a key role in transport. There's no doubt about that. Certainly at the heavier end. I think we will see it in maritime certainly. We'll see it in heavy goods vehicles doing anything over sort of 200 to 250 miles. We will see it in rail in certain parts of the UK, and we'll see it in aviation. We need to think about green hydrogen production as a key part of that, but blue is going to be part of that puzzle as well. So blue through CCUS and other mechanisms. Interestingly, obviously green hydrogen production requires water, and it needs desalinized water to look at. And again, we need to start thinking about the whole value chain from what we call well to wheel in mobility, which means that we need to have clean water going into green hydrogen plants. So we've started to see a lot of focus on the electrolysis side, but how do we get clean water in the first place? Desalinization is going to be a key part of that. Hydrogen fuel cell reconditioning and remanufacturing is going to be part of that. Again, not really looked at because there's not enough of them on the market at the moment, and therefore there's not enough demand. And then I think the other key part of this puzzle is around the grid infrastructure and how do we actually deliver enough energy around the network. So there's a great story that was told to me by Scottish Power, one of the energy network companies. So they've been planning, preparing for people shifting to electric vehicles, and they were mightily surprised and shocked when about 2.5 years ago, a whole cul-de-sac, which is a no-through road in the UK with houses all the way around the back of it, a whole cul-de-sac decided to switch in about 2 weeks to electric vehicles, and they all went to go and charge them overnight, and it burnt out the distribution network because no one was expecting that much demand from the network. So there's a whole range of stuff that needs to be done in terms of supporting that through smart charging, through demand-side response to the energy networks. I'm just going to go slightly upstream of that into the energy part of the world and say that we also need a lot of work in just getting that whole ecosystem working, from green energy from well to wheel. So we need more offshore wind, and obviously a lot of innovation at the moment from the floating offshore wind perspective. But there's a really interesting one, a company that was invested in last year in the UK, which is focusing on enhancements to energy distribution networks, and specifically focused on transmission of energy. So how do we reduce transmission loss and improve the resilience of that whole network? So I like to think of this, that convergence of sectors is really, really key to me. And everything from downstream in terms of I'm going to plug in my car and drive it, through to upstream in terms of how we're going to get those future fuels, all of that is to play for.
Very good, great answer. Do you maybe sort of a question specifically for you? So obviously, you say you represent the circular economy. If you're a startup, you know, coming to the UK, and you think, well, you know, the circular economy is certainly an area where I've got capabilities, I've got skills, I've got opportunities. And any specific areas within that economy you think it's easier for a startup to get a foothold than others? Because it's a very, very broad sector. Are there any areas where you think, you know, that's an easier part to get actually a foothold in the circular economy?
That's a great question. I think that's $1 million question as well, if we can crack that out. But I want to say, I want to talk about the design. You know, I think design is really the key, you know, thing about, you know, with tech is the key thing to unlock the potential. You know, Ben talked about the batteries, you know, after a few decades, you know, what we're gonna do with those batteries. We're having this problem with wind turbines. The first generation of wind turbines will be decommissioned probably in the next couple of years. It's not that they're not usable, they're functionally still okay, but then the technology advanced, and then the new wind turbine more efficient. So that's why company can't get subsidies, so they're moving into this new wind turbine. The problem is 90% of the wind turbine actually can be recycled, but the last 10%, which is the blades, that is made from fiberglass. It's pretty tough. You can't really break it down. You can't really do anything about that. So that's the challenge bit of that. But then going back to why it's to do with circular economy and why it's to do with design is if they had thought about the problem, you know, upstream, then this problem probably would have been solved. But now going forward, if you're gonna start your business, just echoing Ben talk about this whole value chain, think about design, think about how you not just design from waste, not just recycling, not just, you know, okay, this is a, you know, pot of waste, the plastic, what can I do with that? It's more thinking about how can you design out the waste from your business from the very beginning. And I think that's the element I would emphasize on that. And another thing is, I really think circular economy is one big party. You know, there is no one company could do it themselves. Yeah. And I think, you know, this mindset shift from being competitive to collaborative, find partners, and even cross sectors. You know, I've worked with some startups, they're brilliant. They're using food waste to turn that into insulation materials using in built environment. Those innovation, those, you know, this interdisciplinary, you know, that edge is the exciting bit. So I would try to, you know, go out, speak with, you know, partners or business in different sectors and trying to find that synergies with them.
Very good. I think we've got time for one last question. That's for everybody in the panel again. I think it's fair to say that startup scale-up businesses have got great ideas, but they don't have the money or the customer base. The corporates lack the ideas quite often, but have got money and the customer base. So how easy do you think it is for a green tech startup or scale-up of business to actually engage with UK corporate in green tech? You know, it's certainly easier now than it used to be, but how easy is it, and what are the kind of I'm not saying pitfalls, but what are the kind of advice you would give, kind of like how to best approach corporates, be that through a corporate challenge, be that through one of their own incubators or accelerators? What would you say is sort of the easier way of doing that? Chris, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure.
You nodded in
yes.
their agreement.
I used to work in open innovation for a bit, which was exactly that, how
right.
large corporates interact with startups and universities. It is challenging because often they don't speak the same language.
Yeah,
and
correct.
Particularly with respect to timescale. You know, quick for a
Yeah.
startup is like 3 months.
Yeah.
Quick for a startup is like 3 days.
Yeah.
So getting over that mismatch, I think that's why accelerator and growth programs are very useful here. So I talked earlier about the Technation program. There are lots of private sector accelerators, Ignite I mentioned, but there are many others, and a lot will focus very specifically on different aspects of the technology, so from agri-tech to energy to whatever. Some of those are funded by corporates, and therefore all the big energy companies will do these kinds of things. Siemens, I think, has been operating in this space as well, so those are good other options. But I think also talk to the investors, because if you're talking to a corporate VC or you're talking to a venture capitalist from an institutional one, they will also give a lot of advice. But that's why sitting even in an incubator, so a place like the Codebase or
Yeah.
Idea Space in Cambridge or wherever, I think will also be helpful because you can tap into
Yes.
that expertise, get some advice from people who've been there and done it before. I think that will be helpful.
Very good. Adam, do you want to go?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to go. So I would say, and I'll come at this from kind of a large corporate because that's what we are kind of. I would say really do your homework on the organisation that you want to, let's just say penetrate, leave a mark with or move in there. I like what you said about language. Talk the language. I mean, we as a construction firm within Skanska, there's a certain language which actually, when I'm talking to my wife at home, I have to talk in a different language. If I explain it in that way, she doesn't understand it. So put yourself in that situation where you're trying to either pitch your product to your wife, partner, whoever, or your mum or dad, and really dumb it down, but try and put yourself in their mindset. So that's one. And then if you could get within, if you've got a product that is really of interest, and as a large corporate you take it on, it's kind of the speed the large corporates will move up, and I think is a really good example that when you've got a PLC and you've got shareholders, it's going to be slow. So you've got to be confident with that profile that you're going to go through. It's not going to happen tomorrow, and there'll be a period of time that you get there. So I think time, in essence, but you've penetrated. You're in one of the big corporates. If I take the example of what we've done where we created a startup within to particularly tackle the intelligent buildings problem, yes, we could go out and buy bits of software, but actually there was a piece missing that we couldn't piece it all together and actually make it work where the virtual world tilts with the real world. So this is what this building does. We did that from within because the startup needed to kind of grow within and go at a certain pace. So bear that in mind that large organisations are starting to invest in startups. So how would you set yourself apart from that challenge early on? So yeah, hopefully that's some help.
Thank you. Ben?
Sort of risk sounding like a broken record, I repeat his language, but I think there's a particular part of that which is understanding benefit and being able to practice and to demonstrate it, which is that ultimately every corporate has a finite investment pool, investment pot, and what it's prepared to put at risk. And also it needs to be confident, because if you're a Skanska and you're selling to your clients, you need to be confident that the people you're bringing with you are able to deliver. You don't want to put your profit at risk because people who work with you can't deliver. So it's difficult, clearly it's difficult for startups to do because you haven't got things at scale necessarily, or many customers that can give you testimonies or credentials. But actually, and I'll echo our colleague from the PR firm earlier, focus on demonstrating capability, not just the hype. And it goes, I know that sounds like a very sensible thing to say, but it's really, really key. KPMG, we do work with startups, but we need to see capability first. We need to actually see a proven product. It doesn't need to necessarily have a customer, but it needs to pass our own due diligence processes as an organisation to say, yes, that actually looks like a duck and it smells, walks like a duck and it is actually a duck. So that's really important. And talking about benefits, realise what the key benefits you're going to deliver from a cost-saving perspective, from a revenue-generative perspective, from a sustainability perspective. Really, really clearly articulate those. I would say as well, look for the end customer as well as the immediate tier one or the corporate. So in my world in infrastructure, the end customer is as important as the tier one you're going to be potentially selling into, because that is going to be the person who's going to be paying the bills at the end of the day. So in my world, when I work with National Highways, or what was Highways England, or Network Rail, or Transport Scotland, ultimately they're the ones pushing the tier one, saying, we want you to be doing more of this, we want to see more sustainable solutions, we want to be, and playing into that and understanding what their demands are is going to be really, really critical. And often those organisations are running their own incubators and their own innovation funds. So, good example, National Highways has an £85 million or £80 million innovation pot, and it didn't get through it in the last settlement period. So it's really pushing to use that funding. And that's where corporates will see actual live demonstrators in the world. And those end buyers, end customers will say to the corporates, these are a great selection of people who we think you could work with. Bring them into your supply chain, please. So those are my key sort of suggestions.
Thank you. Finally, G.
It's brilliant. I haven't got much to add on.
Okay.
There's one thing, if I may, just I think it's a real dichotomy between big corporate and startup, and we want to find the big corporate, who has got a problem. You really got to understand what is the problem they're having, and then you could present your solution. I think we work with lots of big corporate. They come to us, they tell us this is the problem we have. What kind of innovation, what kind of startup in your pool could help us solve this problem? So I really think again, just try to be in that ecosystem, and then you're more connected, more attuned into what's going on in the industry.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. I think it's a great answer. So well done to our panel.